We have found the witch. May we burn her?
I'm not a witch. I'm not a witch.
If she weighs the same as a duck, she's made of wood.
And therefore...
A witch! A witch! A witch!
Hello, I'm Omnivorous, and we've got another quick Commander deck tech for you, this time featuring Tasha, the Witch Queen, from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. This Planeswalker is pretty nice because she benefits you every time you steal a spell from your opponents, giving you a 3/3 demon in the aftermath. She can also draw a card and then exile a sorcery or instant from each of your opponent's graveyards with a page counter on it. Then her minus ability lets you cast one of those spells for free. With all of this in mind, I've leaned into the idea of stealing spells and things from our opponent's decks. We're going to steal things when we attack them. We're going to steal things just by sitting still and doing nothing. We're going to steal things from them by using spells. We're just going to keep stealing things from them. It's going to be fun. Hopefully the end result will be a ton of demons as well as all of our opponent's good stuff. Now, I personally prefer this strategy because it's not reliant on our opponent's deck really having a lot of good things or specifically good sorceries and instants, as much as just we're going to take your stuff and use it no matter what and then get lots of demons. That said, I have seen people go for mass mill strategies with Tasha, and that's very viable for her. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you're enjoying the videos here at the All-Consuming Nerddom channel. So let's get the heisting started.
Your skills are required for a job.
You son of a bitch, I'm in.
The first of our crew are going to be creatures that steal things from our opponents when they hit them on attack. The Mind Eater and the Fiend of the Shadows have very similar abilities, letting opponents choose what cards they're going to exile, and then you get to cast them whenever you want, as long as they remain in exile, when you bank those spells for later. Elder Brain is a 6/6 with Menache that, whenever it attacks a player, hits all the cards in their hands, gives them a lot of more cards to replace them, but more importantly lets you play any lands that are hit from that player, and cast any spells that you might get off of them as well. Then we've got Thief of Sanity and Fallen Shinobi. Both these guys will grab cards off the opponent's deck. With the Thief of Sanity, you look at the top 3 cards of the opponent's deck, you pick one, put it in exile, and the rest into their grave. With the Fallen Shinobi, you only look at the top 2, but until end of turn, you may cast those cards without paying their cost, so you just get both those cards right then. In that same vein, we've got Predator's Hour, Nashi, Moonsage's Scion, and the Night Veil Spectre. All of these guys have a very similar ability. They'll only get one card off of the top of the opponent's deck. The main highlight here is that Nashi, no matter who he hits all a player's decks, including yours, when he gets through. So he's really nice. The Predator's Hour is cool because it does give you the ability to have menace on all of your creatures, and then when they connect, they exile the top of the opponent's library and let you cast them. And then, of course, Night Veil Spectre is just static one card off the top of the player's library when it connects. We're gonna mix it up a little bit with the Dazzling Sphinx. When this gal gets through, she lets you exile the top of an opponent's library until you hit an instant or sorcery, and then you get to cast that card for free, and then put all the rest on the bottom of that player's library. Pretty nice way to Chaos Wand people. Also making an appearance is Rexiel, the Risen Deep. This guy has Island Walk and Swamp Walk, so he almost always gets through, and then he'll exile a instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard when he hits and let you cast it. Honestly, he's not the kind of seafood I have in mind when a girl asks me if I eat tuna, but he'll get the job done. And we have some of our best attackers with Mind Leech Mass and Silent Blade Oni. Both these guys have the same ability of when they deal combat damage to a player, they look at that player's hand and let you cast a spell for free. Really effective in what we're trying to do with this deck. An honorable mention in this category is Captain Ingothrod. This horror pirate gives all of your horrors menace, and then whenever a horror you control deals combat damage to a player, that player mills that many cards. And then at the beginning of the end step, you get to take a artifact or creature that was milled or put into the graveyard from the library anytime this turn and get it back to play under your control. Not bad, Captain Squidface. How many alters of you are going to be Davy Jones? I'm just guessing, like a billion? So we can't rely on attacking to get the job done because, people might have blockers and that would just stop our entire plan of stealing things from our opponent. And we can't have that. We're gonna first touch base on our enter the battlefield effects when we're looking at passive theft effects. Leading the charge of these is going to be Hostage Taker. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you get to exile target artifact or creature until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield, and then you may cast it as long as it remains exiled. Gonti, Lord of Luxury, will hit an opponent's library for the top 4 cards and then let you pick the best one and exile it, then let you cast it as long as it remains exiled, very much like a lot of our other effects. We exile all opponents' graveyards with Author of Shadows, and then we get to pick one of the cards that is a non-land and we can cast it. Rounding out our Enter the Battlefield effects is one that hits the opponent's hand. Hey, look at that. We hit hand, we hit grave, we hit library, and we hit the battlefield. It's really well rounded. Anyway, the last one is Intellect Devourer, which will, when it enters the battlefield, exile a card from each opponent's hand, and then you may play lands and cast spells that are exiled this way. Not a bad start, but what we really want are cards that'll just exile and allow us to cast things whenever we want without us having to tell them to do anything or have them enter the battlefield or anything like that. So we'll move on to Dragar Necromancer and Dothai Voidwalker. The Necromancer is going to hit any creature that is dead, put an ice counter on it, and then allow you to cast it. You can only use snow mana as if it was mana of any color, so that's why we do have snow basics included. Voidwalker is a little more flexible. It'll hit anything that hits the graveyard from anywhere, and then it'll exile it and allow you to tap and then sacrifice the Voidwalker later and cast the best thing that it ever exiles. It's really one of the best cards printed in a while. Next up, we have the Opposition Agent, which will allow us to scum off of our opponent's searches. So if they ever try to tutor anything, we get to tutor their deck instead. This guy's notorious to the point of infamy. Most Commander players know what he's all about. Xanathar has, at the beginning of your upkeep, choose target opponent. Until end of turn, that player can't cast spells. You may look at the top card of their library, and anytime you may play the top card of their library, and you may spend mana as that were mana of any color to cast spells this way. Alright, so what does this mean? Well, basically, if the opponent you choose has spells on top of their library, you can keep casting spells as long as you have mana to cast spells and just go through the top of their library until you hit land. You do get the chance to play one land off the top of their library as long as you haven't played one land from your hand, but after you hit the second land, things kind of stop. Arvinox is also a massive text that says, at the beginning of your end step, exile the bottom card of each opponent's library face down. For as long as those cards remain exiled, you may look at them and cast permanent spells from among them and spend mana as if it was color of any type to cast these spells. So, he gets cards off the bottom of each opponent's library, but he can only cast permanent spells. He also isn't a creature unless you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, which is a little bit of a downside, but can also protect him from removal spells, letting him sit back and steal from your opponents. So we got plenty of creatures to do some stealing for us, but now we need to look at some spells. Stolen Goods, Siphon Insight, and Xander's Pack all hit your opponent's library for a spell. With Stolen Goods, target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until he or she exiles a non-land card, and then you get to cast that card until end of turn without paying its mana cost. Siphon Insight lets you look at the top 2 cards of an opponent's library and then choose one and exile it. As long as it remains exiled, you get to cast that card. It has the added bonus that it can flash back for 3 mana. Xander's Pack exiles the top card of each opponent's library and then lets you cast spells exiled this way using life. And then it has Casualty 2, so you can actually copy it if you sacrifice a creature with power 2 or greater. We have 2 spells that'll actually steal cards straight out of our opponent's hands with Extract Brain and Psychic Intrusion. With Extract Brain, you pay 1 blue and 1 black and X to look at X cards from an opponent's hand, and then you can cast one of those cards of your choice for free. Psychic Intrusion lets you look at an opponent's hand, then choose a card from their hand or their graveyard and exile it. Then you may cast that card as long as it remains exiled. Gale's Redirection is kind of a counter spell. It'll exile target spell and then you get to roll a 20. If you get the high roll, then you get to cast that spell for free. If not, then you can still cast that spell, but you have to pay for it. We also have Memory Plunder and Flawless Forgery. Both of these cards will hit instants and sorceries in your opponent's graveyards. Memory Plunder lets you cast an instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard for free. Pretty nice for 4 mana. Flawless Forgery does the same thing except for it has Casualty 3. Now, it is worth noting that Flawless Forgery unfortunately does not trigger our commander because it exiles the card and then makes a copy. All of our other effects that cast from exile actually cast the card from exile instead of making a copy. Just worth noting so there is no confusion. With that little stipulation out the way, that also applies to our next 2 cards, Mnemonic Deluge and Spell Twine. Mnemonic Deluge exiles target instant or sorcery from a graveyard and then copies that card 3 times. In a similar way, Spell Twine will hit 2 cards, 1 card from your graveyard and 1 card from an opponent's graveyard, and let you cast the copies. One of the best cards we have to steal from our opponents is Mnemonic Betrayal. This card will exile all cards from opponents' graveyards, and then you may cast them until end of turn. Any that you don't cast do go back to your opponent's graveyards, but with a lot of mana, you're going to be casting a lot of their stuff. Talent of the Telepath is also another really powerful one, as it digs 7 deep to get a instant or sorcery, and then lets you cast it for free. If you happen to have Spell Mastery, which is really easy with this deck, then you get to cast 2 instants and sorceries for free. And then there's our best theft spell. It's gotta be Praetor's Grasp, letting us search our opponent's library for anything, exile it, and then let us cast it when we need it. Now, this entire deck is nothing but theft, so even our other permanents are focused on stealing from our opponents. We've got the Chaos Wand and the Rod of Absorption. The Chaos Wand will exile cards off the top of an opponent's deck until you hit an instant or sorcery, letting you cast that spell. Pretty handy when you want to dig for a removal spell that you don't have. And then the Rod of Absorption absorbs instants and sorceries that go to the opponent's graveyard. Really handy if they happen to be a spell slinger. You're getting lots of cards off the rod, and then you can sacrifice it and cast one of those cards exiled. We got a few enchantments, and one of the best is Cunning Rhetoric. This is going to exile a card off the top of a deck whenever an opponent attacks you or a planeswalker you control, allowing you to cast cards that are exiled this way. Rose Class comes out early for a blue and a black, and then it allows you to hit an opponent and exile the top card of their library. You level it up to give your creatures menace, and then once it's finished leveling up, you can cast cards that you've exiled once you've hit your opponents with Rogue Class out. We're gonna steal a spell every time our opponents cast a spell with Mind's Dilation. This thing is a house. It'll wreck them if they're playing instants because it's every turn they cast their first spell. King Narfi's Betrayal will mill each player for 4, then allow you to exile a creature or planeswalker from each graveyard. Then the next 2 turns, you can cast spells that have been exiled by King Narfi's Betrayal. Pretty handy if there's already a card in a opponent's graveyard that you're really wanting to snipe. Speaking of sniping graveyards, we'll just hit it all with Hedonist Trove. When it enters the battlefield, we'll exile all cards from target opponent's graveyard, and then each turn you may play a land exiled from Hedonist Trove, and then you may cast 1 spell exiled with Hedonist Trove each turn. Rounding out our theft effects are 2 planeswalkers with Ashiok Nightmare Muse and Ashiok Nightmare Weaver. The Nightmare Muse creates nightmares that'll exile cards whenever they attack or block, defends itself with a bounce effect, which is okay, but if you happen to get to its level 7, it'll let you cast 3 cards that are in exile for free. Now, it is important to note that it doesn't care how those cards got to exile. If you happen to exile them some other way, it just cares that they are face up, and then you get them for free. So all of our exile and bank cards for later effects will work with this ability from Ashiok. Then there's the Nightmare Weaver, the OG Ashiok. It'll +2 to exile 3 cards from target opponent's library, and then you can get a creature from among those that have exiled using its -X, and then if you happen to get to its 10, very unlikely, it'll exile all cards from all opponents' hands and graveyards. All decks need ramp to be efficient, and if you've seen my other deck techs, you know that we're going to need to bring in some rocks, since we are Sans Green. Is this an auto-include? Is this what an auto-include looks like? It's Soul Ring and Arcane Signet. Yes, they're back. They're in this deck. Let's move on. We're gonna run both the Talisman and the Dimir Signet to get us that 2-drop ramp that is really essential to get things going. And since 2-drop ramp is so essential and we are strapped for it, we're going to run the diamonds, the Sky Diamond and the Charcoal Diamond. Recently reprinted Wayfarer's Bauble makes an appearance. I'm sure Mitch is very happy about this one. This guy is actually pretty good in specific decks, especially Sans Green. And sticking to 2-mana rocks, we have the Fell War Stone and the Thought Vessel. These guys are a little more powerful. The Fell War Stone will give us any mana that our opponents have, so if they happen to have blue and black, we're good. And the Thought Vessel will let us have an infinite hand size. Carrying on to utility, we're a little strapped for slots in this deck, so we're going to need some of the most efficient utility answers. Topping the list for draw assistance is going to be Phyrexian Arena and Rhystic Study. Yes, the Arena is a little boring because it only gets you 1 card per turn cycle, but it's still going to get you that extra card, which is what we need to guarantee. Then the Rhystic Study is an all-star. It's amazing. In anything, it will get you the cards. Allowing us to control the board, we have 3 board wipes with Cyclonic Rift, Damnation, and Black Sun Zenith. Cyclonic Rift and Damnation are pretty much a given, but I feel more people should look at Black Sun Zenith as it is recurable if you happen to draw it again. Assisting Tasha specifically is the Chain Veil. This will allow her to activate both of her abilities in 1 turn if necessary, allowing us to hit a specific spell in an opponent's graveyard and then cast it. We should actually have a lot of removal thanks to stealing spells from our opponents, but just in case, we also have our own removal in Deadly Rollick and Feed the Swarm. Deadly Rollick is a free kill spell most of the time, which is always fun, and then we've got Feed the Swarm in there because it will hit enchantments if we need enchantments done. And the last of our utility is a little thing called Tasha's Hideous Laughter. This is in here more to just troll our opponents and exile a good chunk of their library. You know, have a little laugh. This deck is a little more affordable than my last deck, but it's still a little on the pricey side for cardboard. So I do encourage people to go for proxies if they really want to get those nice fancy cards and they don't want to pay for them. But just in case you don't like the idea of proxies, I do have some budget options for you. We cut Rhystic Study for Taden Indulgence. Cyclonic Rift will come out for Crush of Tentacles. Crush of Tentacles will give us the advantage and crush some testicles. We lose Deadly Rollick to lean into the idea of milling our opponents with Cut Your Losses. We drop Damnation for Consuming Tide. Praetor's Grasp goes for Covetous Urge. We lose Phyrexian Arena for Dead Man's Chest. Mind Leech Mask comes out for Sage of the Beyond. Sage of Beyond is really good actually. It'll reduce the cost of all of those spells we're exiling. We cut the Op Agent in favor of Nemesis of Reason. Nemesis of Reason is another card playing into the mill strategy. We drop the Dothai Voidwalker in favor of Thieves Guild Enforcer. And we cut Cunning Rhetoric for Knowledge Pool. And that will do it for the deck. I hope you guys really like this one. I feel like it's really interesting. Again, I focused on stealing things instead of focusing on trying to hit them with the -3. I feel like that's a little unreliable. I want to just go for the throat, steal their spells, and make as many demons as possible. But hey, What did I do wrong? What did you think of it? What could be added? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe to the channel or hit that dumb fucking bell thing to keep up with all of my uploads. Or you can check out my Twitch channel where I play RPGs, usually the underappreciated or the overlooked, to see if they're any good or to show you why I like them. Until next time, folks, y'all stay hungry and thanks for watching.
You sought something in that chest? Something that is here no longer?
Here no longer. You stole them, didn't you? You're some kind of sneaky witch thief.